What if the man who killed your daughter was the same man she loved the most? I used to think I knew what I'd do. I thought I'd pull the trigger, end his life the second I learned the truth. But no, not after you've stood in a freezing morgue, looking at your little girl's lifeless body, her eyes wide open, as if she's still waiting for you to answer a question she never got to ask. My name is Frank Donovan. I used to be a cop. I know this system. I know how it works and how it fails. And just as I expected, they closed the case. Car accident, they said. She lost control in the rain. But I've seen hundreds of crash scenes in my life, and I can tell when something's random and when it's staged. They say time heals all wounds. That's a lie. Time doesn't heal. It sharpens. Every small detail starts glowing in the back of your mind, whispering confessions you never heard. And then it hit me. The last person to see my daughter alive was her husband, the man I once called my own son. I still remember that night. He came home late, mud on his raincoat, eyes avoiding mine. When I asked what happened, he said, "She was taking her meds. She lost control." I wanted to believe him. But the instincts of a cop said otherwise, and the instincts of a father screamed louder. I didn't go to the police. I didn't need the courts. All I needed was time and silence. I started watching, tracking his every move, every phone call, every door that opened and closed. He had no idea I was there, that someone had quietly stepped into his life. I didn't have to touch him. All I had to do was let him touch his own fear, because sometimes justice doesn't come in the light. It comes when a man can no longer sleep in his own darkness. And what happens at the end of this story will shock you. They say a father's first duty is to protect his child. But what do you do when the danger doesn't come from the outside, but from the very person your child sleeps beside every night? Her name was Lily. She was bright, stubborn, and had a heart too pure to see how easily kindness could be used against her. When she brought Ethan home for the first time, I thought, finally, someone who makes her smile with her eyes, not just her lips. Ethan was polite, soft-spoken, the kind of man who shook hands with both of his. At the wedding, when he promised to love and protect Lily for the rest of his life, I believed him. I truly did. 2 years later, that belief killed me. The last time I saw my daughter alive was a Sunday morning. She came for breakfast, her hair still damp, saying Ethan had another night shift. She talked about their new house, about the woods behind it, about how quiet the nights were. "You should visit, Dad," she said, her voice trembling just a little. "You'd love it there." There was something strange in her eyes that morning, something I couldn't name, but that made the air turn cold around me. I almost asked, but she changed the subject before I could. That night I called her, no answer. I called again, and again. By the fifth call, I didn't need anyone to tell me. Something had happened. A father knows. It's a truth that lives in the blood. The next morning the police came to my door. They told me they'd found Lily's car in Miller Creek. Said the rain made the road slick. Said it was an accident. I heard the words, but they sounded like noise. I'd investigated hundreds of crashes in my life, and I know what chaos looks like. Real accidents leave traces. This one was too perfect. I demanded to see the car. They hesitated, but the badge still carried my name. Retired Detective Frank Donovan. The hood was crushed, the windshield shattered, but the driver's seatbelt had been sliced clean through. Rain doesn't do that. A knife does. When I told Ethan, he didn't flinch. He just looked down and said, "Frank, you need to stop. You'll only make things worse." His calmness terrified me. Worse? What could possibly be worse than losing my daughter? That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's face, wet hair clinging to her cheek, her lips moving as if she were trying to tell me something I couldn't hear. I lay there in the dark, listening to my own heartbeat and one question echoing in my mind. How afraid was she in those final seconds? When the sun rose, I knew one thing. I couldn't save her, but I could bring the truth to the surface. I wouldn't listen to the police. I wouldn't listen to Ethan. I would listen only to the silence my daughter left behind, because sometimes it's that silence where the truth finally starts to scream. They told me it was an accident. The badge and the white-sheetled men told me it was an accident. Their words were clean, final, like a verdict read into a microphone. But accidents don't plan their details. Accidents don't leave tidy, surgical cuts where a seatbelt should be torn. Accidents don't come with the little, nearly invisible signatures that only a man who's worked the streets his whole life can read. So I stopped waiting for proof to fall into my lap. I stopped pleading with detectives who wanted closure and not truth. I began to build a different kind of case, one that didn't require a courtroom, a lawyer, or even a witness who would stand in a box and swear to anything. I built an argument out of noise. It began small. An envelope slipped under Ethan's front door with a single Polaroid inside. Lily's sweater, the one she always left at his place, damp and folded the wrong way. No note, no signature. The photograph was taken from the angle of the driveway, the sweater's tag visible, as if I had stood where the streetlight washed its yellow against his stoop and waited until the right moment. He found it in the morning and laughed in front of me. The kind of laugh that tries to make light of something heavy but fails. That was the first entry in a journal I kept for myself. March 12th, Polaroid. Reaction, forced grin. Time, 07:43. Effect, unease. Glanced twice at driveway. I learned very early that fear does not have to be gruesome to be effective. It simply has to be believable. So I played him the way you play a desperate gambler. I changed the password on his smart lock the night he forgot to log out of his account. I knew he would check in the morning to let in a contractor, to fetch something, to get coffee. He cursed, reset the code, blamed a glitch. Another line in the book. March 18th. Smart lock reset. Reaction, anger, blame technology. Time, 06:12. Effect, tight fist. Walked faster to car. I left subtle reminders where only he would find them. A single glove at the top of the basement stairs. Damp soil clinging to the cuff. A receipt for gas with a station circled. The time matching the window of his alibi the night Lily disappeared. A voicemail with static and a breath that was not his. Each small thing fit together like a seamstress's pattern until the picture they formed was unmistakable. He began to look over his shoulder. That was the true moment the plan started to hum. People who are innocent are not always brave. Sometimes they panic and make mistakes that look like guilt. Ethan started to make those mistakes. He started to lock his phone in the glove compartment and skip family dinners. He drove the long way home. He stopped answering when neighbors waved. He replaced his car battery, then checked the trunk 3 times before leaving for work. I recorded it all the way. A surgeon records a patient's vitals. April Sec has the glove on stairs. Reaction, scanning house, alarm system checked. Later that night. Time, 22:01. Effect, insomnia. April 9th, voicemail. Reaction, pale. Replayed message. Time, 03:14. Effect, nervous pacing. Every entry had a detail. The way his knuckles whitened when he gripped a coffee cup, the animal sound in his throat when a police car went by, the tremor in his hand when he tried to force a smile at a neighbor's barbecue. I wrote them not as a confession, but as a lesson. I wanted the book to read like the ledger of a man's conscience, unspooling in real time. I wanted him to see that ledger in the end and recognize the handwriting. He began to see strangers where there were none. He began to wake up in the middle of the night, convinced something had shifted in the room. He would stand in a doorway and stare at nothing for so long that the dog would whine. Once, a neighbor, an old woman who liked to prune her roses at dawn, called me and asked if I'd seen Ethan in the garden that night. I said no and kept my mouth shut. She later told me she'd seen a shadow cross his yard, quick and low, and that it looked like someone crouching. I put that down in my notes, too. April 21st. Neighbor sighting. Reaction, paranoia increases. Time, 05:01. Effect, calls. Teresa, sister, says he's not sleeping well. This is where methods people expect to be cruel would have stumbled. There was a temptation, believe me, to make a scene, to stage a violent break-in and let the police arrest the man on the spot. It would have been easy, even satisfying. But brutality is noisy. It brings light. When you want someone to fall apart from the inside, you move in the silence between their breaths. So, I planted doubts. A grocery bag left behind with a receipt for a pharmacy 2 towns over, where Ethan claimed he hadn't been. A scratch on his steering wheel that he could not explain. A key I dropped once at the base of his mailbox and then, days later, called the locksmith to say there had been an attempted break-in at his neighbor's house. Each small thing spoke to him in the only language he would understand. Evidence. He began to speak differently in public. Casual conversations about work shortened into clipped sentences. Friends noted his irritability. At a 4th of July party, he laughed too loud at a joke and then apologized, eyes darting. I wrote it all down. July 4th, public breakdown. Reaction, loud laugh, then remorse. Time, 21:12. Effect, friend texts asking if he's okay. And the ledger grew. It became a map of his unraveling. One night, 3 months into the quiet campaign, he came to my porch. He left a bottle of bourbon and a card that read simply, "For your grief." I did not take the bourbon. I put it on the table and wrote in the journal, August 11th, bourbon left on porch. Reaction, brief relief, then guilt. Time, 23:58. Effect, 10 minutes of watching through blinds. No sleep that night. The last entry before the thing I had been waiting for recorded, September 3rd, midnight. Walk. Reaction, pacing, cigarette butts found 2 houses down. Time, 00:47. Effect, open window on second floor. Neighbor reports man walking in yard. I did not make the final act for him. I did not need to. The fear I cultivated made him perform it himself. He began to confess to anyone whose ear would take it, muttering half admissions to waitresses, to baristas, to the barman who washed his glass and shook his head sympathetically. He would say things that sounded like apologies and not apologies all at once. He would start sentences with, "I shouldn't have," and then trail off. The fragments were poison. One could stitch them together and make a lie into a rope. The twist, if anyone is still keeping count, is this. I did not write the ledger to use it as a weapon. I wrote the ledger as a mirror. I wanted Ethan to see himself reflected in a series of small truths until the reflection was impossible to avoid. I wanted him to understand what a life looks like when stripped of the excuses. I wanted him to feel, in the privacy of the night, every moment of the terror he had given my daughter. And as the entries piled up and the man I knew as my son became a stranger wrapped in his own fear, I closed the notebook and watched from the dark. They told me the first time that a man can be both a hunter and prey. I learned it again on a bright Tuesday when Detective Serena Morales walked into my kitchen with a notebook and a look that sat somewhere between pity and calculation. "You were seen," she said without preamble. "Near Miller Creek, the night Lily's car went down. You were on a bike path close to where the witnesses placed the vehicle." I remembered that night differently. I remembered the ache that made me walk until my legs felt foreign and numb, the way grief can shove you into motion like a drowning man flailing for shore. But Serena's words landed like accusations, precise and cold. Suddenly, the quiet campaign I'd been running, quiet reminders, a Polaroid on a stoop, felt as if someone had lit matches around it. "You think I killed her?" I asked, because sometimes you need to say the most obscene possibility aloud to measure how heavy it feels. "We're not saying anything yet," she said. "We're asking questions." Word travels fast inside police precincts, but it travels faster in small towns where everyone keeps a little file of everyone else's oddities. Someone had seen me near the creek. Someone had noted the retired detective who'd taken to walking at night. Someone had connected dots that were a map only to them. A reporter called. A neighbor brought me a flyer asking for anyone with information. For the first time in months, I felt a hand at the base of my spine that wasn't mine. Suspicion. That suspicion changed the air. People stopped sharing details with me as easily. A cashier at the grocery store no longer smiled when I reached for my card. Ethan's sister crossed to the other side of the street. And then, because stories entwine like barbed wire, Tom showed up. Tom was the kind of man who carried the past in his jaw. He had been my partner once when I was younger and imagined justice as a straight line. People in town had always said we'd been like brothers, though our lives had gone different directions. Me into retirement and watching, Tom into internal affairs and merciful cynicism. He arrived with a duffel and a face marked by things he hadn't said yet. When he hugged me, it felt like an old movie. He clapped my shoulder and barked my name the way he used to, but his eyes were business. The first thing the town did was decide, Tom is either there to bail me out, or he's there to walk me into a cell. That's their logic. It's a theater built on rumor. "Frank," Tom said, low, once we were in the kitchen, "they're poking at you." "I know," I said. "They saw me by the creek. People see what they want." I could have told him everything I'd done. The photos, the receipts, the voicemail with the breath in it. I could have shown him the notebook where I recorded reactions like a butcher cataloging cuts. I didn't. Not then. You've been playing a dangerous game, Tom told me. Either you come clean or you let me look deeper. I can open old files. I can pull the thread on Ethan's alibis. You want that? There was a hum of hope in his words that made me uneasy. The past has a way of reshaping motives into something else. I had called Tom once, months earlier, half pleading, half looking for a partner in truth, and he'd told me to let the system do its work. Now he was here, which could mean salvation or a second blade. People expect an ally to shout for you, to stand before a squad and vouch for you so the cameras have to ask new questions. Tom didn't shout. He opened soft with questions that sounded like help, but his presence also gave the town a new story. Frank has a friend. His friend is an investigator. What are they hiding together? The rumor mill began a new spool. To add to it, the detectives had found something stupid and vivid in their evidence pile. An old Polaroid, misfiled with the case notes, the same sweater I'd photographed and slipped under Ethan's door. The prints on the border were smeared, open palm smudges that could belong to anyone who handled a development tray. Someone at the station decided those smudges were mine. Someone else decided this was motive. Investigators, even the best, are human. They build narrative arcs the way novelists do. They place suspects on a stage and set lights. When a retired detective starts keeping odd hours, the part they write for him is complicated. Serena kept coming by under the pretense of routine updates. Each visit was a small ribbing with the hand. "You're angry, Mr. Donovan," she told me once. "That's not a crime. But anger is combustible. People see smoke and call firefighters." She asked for my notebooks. I refused. She left with a look that suggested there were ways to get things she wanted that were quieter than subpoenas. The more she pressed, the more the town's gaze warmed into accusation. A neighbor I'd known for years confessed to having seen my car near Ethan's house the week before. "I thought you were visiting," she said. "I'm sorry." When the cops knocked on my door, Tom walked with me to the station. Not because I asked, but because the world of lawmen is a small enough room that friends go where they can still breathe. At an interrogation table I'd once used, a young detective, more paper than experience, sat across from me and smiled the way children do when they think an adult story is a game. "Why didn't you tell us about the Polaroid?" he asked. "I did tell you," I said. Not all answers belong in a police report. Some answers belong to the people they hurt. "You followed Ethan," the kid pressed. "Neighbors saw you. You had motive." There it was. Motive. It's an ugly word that slides hotly across the tongue. I felt it like a slap. And then the real twist came from someone no one expected. Tom stood, and the room shifted the way a ship tilts when the wind changes. He didn't defend me with bravado. Instead, he pulled out a small stack of printouts and laid them on the table as if laying flowers at a grave. "These are calls," he said. "Phone pings from the night of the accident. Ethan's router shows a spike in data at 1:12 a.m. It matches the timestamps of surveillance in nearby lots. Also, Frank," he said, meeting my eyes, "you once took Ethan under your wing." The words landed like pebbles into a deep well. I'd taught Ethan things, yes, in the way a man might teach another to read a map, or tidy his work, or steady his hands. When he came by as a kid, eager to learn how the world kept its secrets, I showed him how to notice small details, how to think like someone who solves problems. Those lessons, given with soft intentions, now lay in the room like rope. Tom wasn't saying I taught him how to kill, but he was saying something worse. I'd taught him how to think like a person who could hide a lie. "You were his mentor," Tom said. "You gave him tools. He used them poorly." It was a confession by implication. I felt like vomiting and like laughing at once. The ledger in my coat burned my thigh like a brand. All the entries I'd written, times, reactions, the way his hand shook, felt excessive and necessary at the same time. They were proof of the unraveling I'd caused. And yet, when Tom laid out Ethan's data, linking the router pings, the night walks, the purchases at a pharmacy 2 towns over, a new picture emerged. It didn't exonerate me. It deepened the mystery. Out in the hall, a reporter whispered into a phone. The rumor took shape. Retired detective keeps secret journal. Friend from internal affairs says he taught suspect. Town divides itself into two camps, those who whispered that justice should be swift, and those who whispered that justice might be something quieter, more ancient. I felt the town's eyes like a net tightening. For the first time, I understood the peril of being a man who knows how systems fail. Curiosity can look like guilt. Tom leaned in and said something that made a brittle sound inside my chest. I'm not here to lock you up, Frank. I'm here because the official story doesn't fit. If Ethan did this, he didn't do it the way a man with no training would. Someone used knowledge. And you think it's me? I asked. I think someone used knowledge, Tom said. We're going to find out who taught whom. He left before the sun went down, and the station lights flicked like distant stars. In the silence he had left behind, I realized the campaign had become its own animal. The hunters had been joined by other hunters, and each had their own quarry. So the world tightened its focus on me, not because I had been caught in any direct crime, but because the places grief had taken me looked suspicious through other people's lenses. People like neat endings. They like villains they can point to. Trouble is, real life messes up those neat plots. It hands you mentors who become maps, notebooks that read like confessions, and friends who show up with duffels full of truth. And truth, as I would learn, is a blade with two edges. Ethan showed up at my door just after midnight. Rain followed him in like a shadow. He looked thinner, older, his skin pale, his eyes sunk deep into sockets that hadn't known sleep in weeks. His hands trembled when he set a bottle of whiskey on the table. I can't live like this anymore, he whispered. It's like she's still here, in the house, in the mirrors. I hear her, every night. I didn't answer. I just watched him. The way a man watches the storm he's been waiting for finally reach the shore. He started pacing, muttering fragments, sentences without beginnings or ends. It wasn't supposed to happen. I tried to stop her. She found the messages. She said she'd leave. And then, his voice cracked. He dropped to his knees. I didn't mean to kill her, Frank. I swear to God. We were arguing in the car. She grabbed the wheel. I panicked. I cut the seatbelt because she was screaming. I just wanted her to stop. The words fell out of him like stones tumbling into a well. I could almost hear the echo of my daughter's final breath in each syllable. I leaned forward. You've been carrying that for a while, haven't you? He looked up, terrified, desperate for forgiveness. Please, you have to believe me. It was an accident. I tried to make it look clean because I knew you'd come for me. You trained me too well. That made me pause. You trained me too well. The memory came back. Me teaching him how to read a crime scene, how to think like a detective, how to hide the truth until you're ready to reveal it. I had given him the language of deception, and he'd spoken it fluently. I thought I could bury it, he said, sobbing. But someone kept sending things. The photos, the messages, He stopped, realization dawning like a blade against his throat. It was you. Yes, I said softly. He backed away, shaking his head. You ruined my life. I smiled. Small, sad, not triumphant. No, Ethan, I didn't ruin your life. I just gave you enough rope to see how you'd use it. He stared at me, breathing hard, waiting for me to explode, to strike, to do the thing he'd been expecting for months. But I didn't move. I didn't kill you, I said. I just taught you how to kill yourself. Slowly, quietly, from the inside. He broke then. The sobs came raw, loud, animal. He clawed at his hair, screaming that he was sorry, that he'd do anything, that he'd turn himself in if I just stop haunting him. I already have, I said. You just don't know it yet. At that exact moment, headlights flared through the window, red and blue slicing the rain. Sirens screamed closer. Ethan froze. I could see it in his face. The terror, the confusion, the betrayal. They won't believe me, he said, choking. You framed me. I stood. No, son. You framed yourself. I just documented it. There was a knock. Then another. The Obkadaker burst open. Serena Morales and 2 uniforms stormed in, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Ethan spun toward them, still holding the bottle. Wait! It was an accident, he cried. Serena's eyes cut to me. Frank Donovan, she said, voice steady. You're under arrest. For what? I asked calmly. For obstruction? For harassment? For interfering with an ongoing investigation? I nodded once. About time. Ethan was still shouting as they let him out, his words mixing with the thunder. Confessions, denials, broken pleas. By the time they shoved him into the cruiser, the rain had washed half his words away. They cuffed me next. Serena leaned close and whispered, "You knew this would happen." "Yes," I said, "but it had to end this way." She looked at me for a long second, as if trying to read something that wasn't in the file. "You think this is justice?" I looked through the rain, at the taillights fading into the distance. "Justice doesn't always need the law," I said. "Sometimes it just needs patience." They drove me to the station. I didn't resist. Through the fog glass of the police car, the world outside looked softer, cleaner somehow. When they booked me, they took everything from my pockets except one thing, my notebook. Serena flipped through it, page after page of Ethan's unraveling, each line dated, timed, described with the precision of a detective and the calm of a surgeon. At the end, she found one final note written in a shaky hand. September 12th, confession achieved. Subject collapsed. Guilt complete. Serena looked up, frowning. "You planned all of this?" I met her eyes. "No," I said. "I simply finished what he started." She closed the notebook and slid it into an evidence bag. "You'll never see daylight again," she murmured. I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but the truth already has." As they led me down the hallway, the rain outside eased to a whisper. I thought of Lily, her laughter, her gentleness, the way she once said, "Dad, you always find the truth, even when it hurts." And now I had, not for the world, not for the system, just for her, because sometimes revenge isn't about taking a life. It's about giving someone back their conscience and making sure they never sleep again.